space. His chariots of wrath, the deep thunder clouds form, and dark is his path on the wings of the storm. You alone are the matchless King. To you alone be all majesty. Your glories and wonders, what tongue can recite? You breathe in the air, you shine in the light. Oh, measureless might, ineffable love, while angels delight to worship above. Thy mercies, how tender, how firm to the end. Our Maker, Defender, Redeemer, and friend. You alone are the matchless King. To you alone be all majesty. Your glories and wonders, what tongue can recite? You breathe in the air, you shine in the light. You alone are the matchless King. To you alone be all majesty. Your glories and wonders, what tongue can recite? You breathe in the air, you shine in the light. You shine in the light. You shine in the light. Oh, worship the King, all glorious above. Oh, gratefully sing his wonderful love. Our shield and defender, the ancient of days, pavilion is splendor and burdened with praise.
You know, Jesus told us the kind of worshipers that God the Father is looking into this room today, searching for. You know, we do. We worship Him. We sing to Him. God comes not just to hear the people up front, right, but to hear His people. And so the kind of worshipers He seeks, Jesus tells us in John chapter 4, are those who worship Him in spirit and in truth. In other words, is our hearts, is there something resonating from our hearts? I'm glad He's not looking for worshipers who sing in tune. Do I have an amen on that one? Or get the notes all right. He's looking for those who worship Him in spirit. From their hearts are engaged. They love Him, right? And in truth. In other words, what God's listening to us sing, He goes, that's right. Because if we're not worshiping in truth, God's up there going, who are they singing to? What king are they talking about? It's not me. So we worship Him in spirit and in truth. And He looks into this room and is so pleased when He finds those kinds of worshipers. So our heart and what we believe is important. Is it true? Let's sing about what we believe, all right?
Jesus Christ. We believe in the Holy Spirit, and He's given us new life. We believe in the crucifixion. We believe that He conquered death. We believe in the resurrection, and He's coming back. He's coming back again. He's coming back again. We believe.
I thought I would start the new year by diving into the deep end, all right? Are you ready for it? I want to do a series called Life's Weightier Issues. You say, Dan, I'm still on a turkey coma. All right, but see if we can kind of pull ourselves out of it. See if we can kind of think a little bit as we go through this. Because here's the deal. You know, it's usually a small window. When you look at 2015, a new year opens up and people get contemplative, right? Well, that window usually slams shut. So I want to kind of stick my foot in the door and keep it open for a while as we look at life's weightier issues. You don't want to skim through 2015, right? You don't want to go through and look back on your life and say, wow, that was pretty shallow. So for that not to happen, you've got to look at some of the more weightier issues. So in the next 6 weeks, we're going to spend some time wading through things like this. Meaning. Does life have any meaning? Then we're going to look at enjoyment. You know, we just burned through a bunch of food and money and stuff and all this. Did we enjoy it? We're going to look at the issue of enjoyment. And then we're going to look at time. And we're going to look at relationships. We'll look at listening. You know, listening to God. You go, wow, if there is a God and He has communicated to us, that might be some really, really valuable information. How do you hear from Him? And then we'll end the series by wrapping up on a lighter topic of judgment and death. So how's that? So that's where we're headed. So you go, wow, Dan. Well, a good question you might be asking is, well, Dan, who in the world is going to guide us through discussions on those issues and those topics? Well, it's not going to be me, all right? Not going to be me. How about if a guy leads us through this who is older? You say, you're pretty old, Dan. Now, older and says, and it came to the place where he said, I have seen everything. So this guy's had the opportunity, the resources, the wherewithal to get around. And he's smart. You know, it'd be nice to have a guy like that leading us through this who's got like the wisdom of Solomon, right? Well, how about Solomon? What I want to do is walk through the book of Ecclesiastes. Take your Bibles and open up into the Old Testament to the book of Ecclesiastes. Page 553, if you use the Bible in a rack in front of you, it's an amazing book. I love the book of Ecclesiastes. I think it's a message that Americans facing 2015 desperately need to hear. I want you to know in preparation for this sermon series, I started out by sitting with the book of Ecclesiastes and saying to God, look, before I even begin to prepare for this sermon series, I need this book. I said, God, I need you to take the words of this book and melt it down into my mind and my heart. I need what you had to say here. And this is a precious piece of God's word. So Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 1 starts out by saying the words of the preacher, the son of David, king of Jerusalem. I believe this is Solomon. Most commentators do, although Solomon doesn't come out and say, hi, I'm Solomon, right? He refers to himself as the preacher, but he's the son of David, which was Solomon, king of Jerusalem. The preacher, you say, well, where's Ecclesiastes come from? That's the Greek word for the preacher. Okay, so that's where we get it. So Solomon is going, look, I'm gonna play the role of the preacher here. And what he does, look in verse 12, chapter 1, verse 12. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. I'm going to check out life and see what we come up with. Let's take a hard look at these things. Let's look at the weightier issues of life. And he says it's an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun. That's an amazing statement. Solomon says, I've checked it out. He is a guy, by the way, who had world-renowned wisdom and insight given to him. Now, most people, and what's going to happen is Ecclesiastes is kind of his journal. His journal. And so we're going to follow him through his journal as he looks at life's weightier issues and asks lots of questions. Now, I have found that most people are afraid to think too long or too deeply about the weightier issues of life. People are afraid to do that, about what's really important. And typically, to get into really thinking about some of these things, you almost have to be prodded into it. You have to be prodded into these things. Typically, we have to be prodded into being serious about the important things. Last week, I was with another staff member, and I was eating at one of my favorite lunchtime spots, Taco Bell, right? I mean, my system would go crash if it didn't have a regular infusion of some of that. And so I'm sitting there with a staff person eating lunch, and 3 kids who've been running around the neighborhood came into the restaurant. And they were all 2 boys and a girl. They were all under the age of 11. And the girl, who was the youngest, she recognized the staff person and me and came up and said, hi, Pastor, how you doing? Oh, hi. And he told us her name and whatever. And these 3 guys, they didn't have anything to do. They're just running around the neighborhood. So they sat down to lunch with us. And we engaged. It was the conversation was a lot of fun. I'm looking at these 2 guys. Hey, you're in charge. Are you watching out for her? Look at this young little girl. Are you taking good care of her? What? I'm not in charge. Yes, you are. You're in charge. But we got into the conversation, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, the one boy made this statement. He says, when I die, I'm coming back as a ghost. And I said, really? And then I said to him, I says, maybe after you die, you don't get to choose what you come back as. Well, he'd never thought about that. He'd never thought about, well, maybe he wouldn't have a choice after he died. Maybe he'd never thought about the thing, okay, I died, I got all kinds of plans after I die, but maybe those plans aren't like rooted in reality. He hadn't thought about that. And you know what I found? Most adults haven't either. We live on these pretty shallow little cliches about life and lots of things. And Solomon's going to poke at those things. He's going to say, Solomon does things like, he says things like this. He'll say in chapter 7, he makes an interesting statement. He goes, you know what? It's better that you go to a funeral than a New Year's Eve party. In his words, he says, it's better to go to a house of mourning than a house of feasting. Over the holidays, I was a part of 3 funerals. And Solomon says, it's better to go to a funeral than it is a New Year's Eve party. You go, wow, Solomon, what's up with that? Are you just a Debbie Downer? No. He said, because the reason is death is the destiny of every man, and the living should take this to heart, he says. So this is what Solomon's going to do. And typically at New Year's Eve parties, you don't sit around and talk about, hey, how do you feel about your approaching death? That's just not the kind of conversation that comes up. But what Solomon's going to do, what Ecclesiastes does, is it prods us to be serious about the important things. In fact, look at the end of the book. He says that that's what these sayings do. In chapter 12, look at Ecclesiastes chapter 12. Go all the way back to the end of the book, the last chapter, and this is what the preacher says. Verse 10. He says, the preacher sought to find words of delight, and uprightly he wrote words of truth. The words of the wise are like goads, and like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings. They are given by one shepherd. He says, you know, what I'm gonna lay out for you, my observations. I've seen everything under the sun, and so what this information, what this wisdom to do, it's going to be like a goad to you. Now, I wasn't that familiar with what a goad was until the day I rode an elephant in Cambodia. That was a riot. Hey, you want to ride an elephant? Like, who wouldn't, right? How often you get a chance to ride an elephant? Now, I didn't drive the thing, right? I wasn't going to get on there if I'm driving. Who was driving was this little 80-pound Cambodian kid. And I'm on there in the back seat. He's in the front seat. And he could make this beast go anywhere he wanted. And I thought, this is impressive. How is he doing this? And I leaned over his shoulder and realized how he got it done. He had looked like he'd cut off a broom handle, and out of the end was a nail sticking out. And, oh, listen to you guys moaning. I mean, do you know how thick an elephant's hide is? We even say elephant hide, all right? And so what he would do is if he wanted to go one direction, he would poke him, and then he'd get him to poke him the other. That's a prod. That is a goad. He was goading that elephant. And what happens is this. Ecclesiastes says all of us need to be goaded about what we believe. What do you believe? Well, I'm going to come back as I go. Really? And he's going to goad us. He's going to go, are you sure? He's going to poke at it, and he's going to goad, and he's going to challenge the lie-induced coma that we all live in. Now, that's frightening. That's very unsettling. If you ever take the time and allow yourself to let down and ask the hard questions of yourself and what you believe and all these things, well, it's frightening. It is frightening. And it's very unsettling. And that's why Solomon says that what you'll find in this book are also nails firmly embedded. In other words, he's not only going to say things and give us wisdom that is unsettling to us, he's going to give us wisdom that will help anchor your life. It is like a nail firmly embedded. So here's reality. Here's truth that you can anchor your life to. So Ecclesiastes is such a valuable, precious gift, priceless truth and wisdom for us in this little book. So are you ready to get into it, though? That's the real challenge, see? Are you serious? Will you be serious about the important things? The late chancellor of the University of Chicago, his name is Robert Hutchins, he said, it's not so important to be serious as it is to be serious about the important things. See what he's saying? It's not so important to be serious. Some people are all so serious. You go, quit being serious all the time. It's not so important that we're serious, but he says it's important to be serious about the important things, see? And then he goes on to say this, the monkey wears an expression of seriousness which would do credit to any college student. In other words, the monkey looks serious. But the monkey is serious because he itches. I would say that most college students look serious, and it's about their itches as well. So we're going to be serious. And what Ecclesiastes is going to force us, and this morning we're going to begin to look at, is the weightier issue of meaning. The first topic we'll look at in this book that Solomon brings up is the issue of meaning. Meaning in life. Does life have any meaning, any purpose, and what is it grounded in? I was going through an airport a number of years ago, and I saw a book on the shelf, and I bought it just because of the title. It was called What Should I Do with My Life? It was on New York Times bestseller list, and what it was is written by Poe Bronson. And it is a collection of stories. He went around and talked to a number of different people. And he collected their stories. And these were all stories about how people were trying to find meaning and purpose and direction for their lives. Right? In the introduction of the book, Poe Bronson writes in the introduction, he says this: "We are all writing the story of our life. We want to know what it's about, what are its themes, and which theme is on the rise. We demand of it something deeper or richer or more substantive. We want to know where we're headed, but we want to ensure that when the end comes, it won't be shallow. We will have done something. We will not have squandered our time here." See, there's something deeply embedded in us, isn't there? The desire for meaning in our lives. Michael Eaton says this: "Mankind thinks and plans. This he scarcely avoid, for he wants to understand where his life is going." You're always, subconsciously or not, you're always thinking and planning and scheming and strategizing. Where is all this going? What are you strategizing to accomplish? He says it's just something we're all doing. This is the burden which, by God's decree, every man bears. The problem of life is no optional hobby. So Ecclesiastes is going to prod us into being serious about important things. Are you ready to dive in? Are you ready for that kind of discussion? Well, Solomon will waste no time right here in chapter 1, beginning right in verse 2, giving us his conclusion right up front. He's seen everything under the sun. Here's his conclusion when it comes to meaning. Are you ready? Life is meaningless. Life is meaningless. This is his conclusion. You say, wow, nothing like like throwing a wet blanket on all the New Year's Eve resolutions. Come to church day on the first Sunday of the year. I'm going to start here. Life is meaningless, right? That's what he says. Look at verse 2. Chapter 1, verse 2, he introduces himself, and then he says, "Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity." Look down at verse 14. "I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and striving after the wind." So what he's saying is, I've checked it out. I've seen everything. Here's the conclusion. All is vanity. Vanity means it's empty. It's futile. I mean, what's the use? There's no substance to all that we run our lives and get all a tither about. It's just air. It's just vapor. It's fleeting. He says, come on, look at it. It's meaningless. It's striving after wind. He says, we're all just chasing bubbles. We're all just chasing mirages. What is the point? That's what he's saying. You say he sounds like, Macbeth and Shakespeare. Life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. And from the crowd, Solomon says, amen to that. You say, well, how did he come to that conclusion? How did Solomon come to that conclusion? Was the preacher just having a bad day? Was the preacher having a bad year? Did he break up with his girlfriend? Things not going well? Did his college football team not even make it to a bowl game? What's he so down about? He's not. Here's the thing you have to understand as you read through the book. The preacher here is not a pessimist. He's not a pessimist. He's a realist. He's a realist. He says, come on, let's talk about it. Let's get past the cliches. Let's get past the Taco Bell banter. Let's talk about this. And he's a realist. And he's saying, look, I've taken a serious look at life under the sun, and this is the reality of the matter. It's meaningless. So you say, well, how did he come to this conclusion? Let's follow his journey. We get to read his journal. We get to read his journal. Are you ready to go with me? You say, I don't know. This sounds depressing. Verse 3. You think it's depressing now? Wait till we get done with the next 12 verses. Verse 3. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun?
What does man gain, verse 3, I'm sorry. What does man gain by all the toil which he toils under the sun? Question, why am I working so hard? Solomon says, why are you working so hard? You know, people go, how you doing? Oh, man, I'm busy. Really? Oh, man, I'm cranking it out. I'm busy. I'm done working 50, 60, 70, 80 hours. He goes, why are you working so hard? What do you mean why I'm working? I don't know, man. I got things to do. I got people need. Why are you working so hard? What's the gain of all this? What are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you taking yourself so seriously? Oh, you're telling us that you're working so hard because what you really want to tell us is you're important. Why are you think you're so important? What? What are you gaining from all this? Why are you working so hard? Why are you taxing yourself like that? He'll go on to say in chapter 2, watch this, in chapter 2, verses 22 and 23. Flip over there if you want, or you can just listen. What has a man from all the toil and striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night, his heart does not rest. This also is vanity. I'm working hard. I'm stressed out. I'm not even sleeping at night. He goes, why? And you go, oh, nobody ever asked me that. In chapter 5, verses 16 and 17, he said, this is a grievous evil. Just as he came, so shall he go. And what gain is there to him who toils for the wind? Moreover, all his days he eats in darkness, in much vexation and sickness and anger. You know, people are just workaholics. They're driven. They're go, and they're all stressed out. They're all uptight. They're not sleeping well. They're really easily, they get ticked off. They're angry. It's like Solomon goes, what are you doing? What are you doing? What is the meaning of all this? Well, I'm important around here. People need me. Oh, really? I remember a guy, I'll never forget this picture. A guy said to me, hey, Dan, when you start to think that you're really important, he said, here's the reality of your involvement in any organization. It's like this. He says, it's like a bucket of water. You take a bucket of water. Okay, you put your fist in there. Okay, now pull it out. That's how important you are. Notice any difference? Well, the water's still in there. That's right. You ever heard this? Nobody is indispensable. Solomon's just taking the goad and going, hey. Verse 4. A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. He steps back a little bit, goes to a few funerals. He goes, it's interesting. A generation goes, generation comes. The earth remains forever. I remember when this was drilled home to me. I was in Cairo, Egypt, and we just landed there. I'd gotten sick and come down with something. And so you combine sickness, jet lag, Egypt, and I wasn't sleeping, And I'm up in the middle of the night. It was a really nice hotel. It had a balcony, and I walked outside in the balcony. It's the middle of the night, 2, 3 in the morning. And it was right next to the Nile River, and then there was this huge bridge over the Nile River that served as a main thoroughfare into the city center. And when we first checked into the hotel, it was cool to watch. Man, the traffic, people all over the place. I got in the middle of the night, and there's still just as much traffic. People, cars, and those annoying little motorbikes. If you ever travel outside, it's constant. People walking. And I'm sitting there going, this is crazy. Where are all these people going at 3 o'clock in the morning? And then I thought this. I am standing here in Cairo, Egypt. People have been scurrying over these sands for thousands of years. What's the point? That's what Ecclesiastes asks. What's the point? Generations come, generations go. The earth remains forever. Maybe you farm it this last year, you farmed it this year. How many people farmed it before you? How many people just left it? And the earth is just here. Look at verses 5 to 7. Then he turns to nature and he notices these cycles, these monotonous cycles. Verses 5 and 6 and 7. The sun rises, the sun goes down, and hastens to the place where it rises. The sun's in a hurry. What? It's just running in circles. The wind blows to the south, it goes to the north. Around and around goes the wind. And on its circuits, the wind returns. He's going, what is this? And then verse 7, all streams run into the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. You ever notice these monotonous cycles in your life? Does it ever hit you? You know what? I think I've done this before. What? You get up in the morning, you go take a shower, you put your towel right back on the same towel rack, and you get down, you get in your car, you drive to work. Same road, same way, same direction. You go to work, you come home, go through your day, you come back to work, from work, and you eat dinner, you help with the kids, you watch a little TV, whatever, and then you go to bed, and then you get up, and guess what? You do the same thing over again. And all of a sudden, something's pulling you. What am I doing? What am I doing? This is just this monotonous, meaningless cycle. Verse 8. What has been is what will be. And what has been is what will be done. I was laughing with a guy in between services. He's an IT guy. And he goes, man, I says, you go to work, you fix a list of problems, and you go back, and what? He says, I got a new list of problems. That's right, it's endless. It's endless, right? All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied, verse 8, with seeing. The eye is not satisfied with seeing. Do you realize there was a day that when a family brought home a black and white TV, they said, this is all we'll ever need. Moms get up and they go through their day. Moms clean up lunch and they get it all cleaned up. And then what do? They say, well, I better start on dinner. Right? Catch up on the laundry. That's a bizarre phrase, right? What mom ever catches up on the laundry? Seriously, you get the last thing folded, baby blows out the diaper, here we go. You never catch up on the laundry, right? You catch up on the laundry, you go, wow, what is with this? What's going on? And guess what? You feed the kids. Thanks, Mom, that was great. Hey, Mom, don't get excited. They're going to be back tomorrow, starved and cranky and crying and wondering when you're going to have dinner ready. You go, wow, what is this? It's exciting to draw a marker on December 31st with the ministry goals. And, that was a year. We spent a year. We're behind and we're going, wow, God's laid these things in our hearts. Did we set the goals too far out there? We're pursuing these things and trying to be frugal with everything. And, man, let's passionately pursue these goals and this ministry that goes on here and around the world and all this stuff. And you go and you're behind and you go, wow. And then you come to the end of the year, yes, we made it. That's great. That's great. Guess what? I've been here for 30 years, okay? We just took an offering this morning. Monday's my day off. I'll come in Tuesday morning. I'll get a report on what the offering was today. I'll bet you anything we're behind. We're behind again. There's a short little poem that I read, I quoted. I had a chance one time to go around to 5 different regional retreats for pastors and lead them in a time of refreshment or encouragement, whatever. Well, in a process, I just offhand almost quoted this poem, and it's the most requested material that I had. Afterwards, they go, hey, Dan, where'd you get that? What was it? You say, what was it? Here's what it was. Men past 40 get up at nights, look out at city lights, and they wonder when they made the wrong turn and why life is so long. Men past 40 get up at nights, look out at city lights, and they wonder when they made the wrong turn and why life is so long. Wasn't it Thoreau that was so famous for saying, most men lead lives of quiet desperation? See, what's happening is they're getting in touch with the meaninglessness of their lives. And Solomon goads us toward that. Verses 9 and 10. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. You say, I've heard that phrase before. Yeah, it comes from here. Nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has been already in the ages before us. You say, oh, wait a minute. I like the words of Malcolm Muggeridge, who said that new news is simply old news happening to new people. This isn't new. This isn't any new. New news. Oh, the news today. It's just old news happening to new people. Listen, you don't think Ferguson is new, do you? You say, what about science? What about all the inventions? What about all the discoveries? Listen to Thomas Edison. You say, yeah, now that guy did a few new things. Here's what he said. His inventions were only, quote, bringing out the secrets of nature and applying them to the happiness of mankind. See, scientists make new discoveries all the time, but they don't discover anything new. It's already been there. I was interested a few weeks ago. News came out, I forget where I saw it, about a fish that they discovered at the deepest parts of the ocean. They go, wow, look at this. Well, it's a new fish. No, that fish has been there a long time. It's just that we just discovered it. That's Solomon's point. Verse 11. You say, Dan, this isn't going well. I'm sorry, I'm just taking you through his journal, right? He said, verse 11, there's no remembrance of former things, or really former people. There's no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of latter things yet to be among those who come after. And he's going, well, here's the deal. If I ask you today, right now, today, all right, who's the number one college football team today? Who is it? That's right. Okay. 5 years ago, who finished number one in the country in college football? Who knows? We're not real sure, are we? That's 5 years ago. Okay, 50 years ago, who was the number one college football team? You're going 50 years ago, that was like leather helmets, and did they play with 7 guys then? Or what was the deal back then? Well, we don't remember. Who was number one college football team 500 years ago? Well, you go, duh, they weren't playing football. Yeah, that's Solomon's point. Right now, the biggest thing going, who's number one? Solomon kind of grins and goes, hey, nobody's going to remember any of this. Here's a challenging thing to think about. Solomon says there's no remembrance of former people, things, and there'll be no remembrance of latter things come to be. Okay, I'd like a raise of hands, serious question. I did it first service. It's okay. How many of you know, I'm not going to ask you for the answer, but how many of you know the names of your great-great-grandparents? Raise your hand. You know the names, I could tell you, of your great-great-grandparents. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, maybe 15. That's about twice as many as first service. You go, seriously? A room, 2 rooms full of people like this, and we're down maybe 20, 25 people can name of their great-great-grandparents. And that's in our family tree. How about the guy living down the street? Oh, I don't have a clue. Solomon's going, listen, this is crazy. People come, people go. We don't remember anybody. They're going to remember me. No, they won't. I'm going to leave a legacy. Really? How long? Verse 15. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. What is crooked cannot be made straight. Do you think you're going to stamp out poverty, disease, and injustice? You hear somebody get all revved up. Well, I'm going to stamp out poverty. We're going to stamp out disease. We're going to stamp out injustice. Really? Really? Have you not come to the realization yet that something fundamentally is broken in our world and beyond any human capabilities of fixing it? Have you not come to that conclusion yet? Solomon says, well, you need to get there. You need to get there. You need to understand this. What is lacking can't be counted. Like the football coach, like the basketball coach I heard that told his players, I can't get out of you what God hasn't put in. And there's some truth to that, isn't there? Many of you are involved in education. You know what? You don't like to think about it, do you? Because somehow it smacks against some of the things we think about. But you know what? If you're in touch with reality and asking yourself the hard questions, you have students in your classroom, you go, you know what? No matter how hard they try, no matter how disciplined they are, no matter how much I can motivate them and love on them, for some kids, it's just not in there. We don't like to talk about that. We don't like to think about that. We just don't. We just like, well, come on. Solomon goes, come on. Verse 16 to 18. Well, I'll just be smart and I'll fix everything and have an answer for everything. Well, he says, I said in my heart, I've acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. Solomon was brilliant. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive, I know that this is also but a striving after the wind. Why? For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. He says, you know, the more I looked into life, the more I saw how messed up this world is and how meaningless things are, and the more I realized that no matter how smart you are and how much you try and collect, there's certain mysteries about life that will never be solved. And he says, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Now, the preacher is not a pessimist. He is a realist. And what he is saying to you and I, we have to understand is this. Life is meaningless without God. Life is meaningless without God. See, Solomon is not a pessimist. He's a realist. He recognizes. He says, all right, I've checked it out. Life under the sun, right? Life under heaven. Life that is a closed system that says, let's leave God out of this. Life that leaves God out of the picture. He says, all right, have at it. Have at it, life like that. He says, it's meaningless. Look at this. There's no meaning. But then what he's going to do in the book of Ecclesiastes is he's going to go, but what if there is a God? What if there is? What if there's a God who lives above the sun? I've checked out everything under the sun. What if there's a God that lives above the sun? I've checked out everything under heaven. What if there's a God who lives in heaven? What if there's a God who's outside the box? What if there are other realities that we may not be able to measure and test and observe scientifically? He says, if that's true, then it opens up all kinds of possibilities for there being meaning in life. Solomon will inject God into the system, and it changes everything. For example, watch chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. Solomon in the middle of all this, you go, wow, this is depressing. Yeah. And then in all of a sudden, he'll say things like this, chapter 7, verse 13 and 14. And all of a sudden, you'll read along, and he'll go, consider the work of God. You go, whoa, that's different. See, it's all about my work and my toil and my gain, what I'm doing, and he goes, consider the work of God. Who can make straight what he has made crooked? What he does is he introduces us to the sovereign God of the universe. Verse 14, in the day of prosperity be joyful. In the day of adversity consider, God has made the one as well as the other, so that man may not find out anything and will be after him. You say, well, I'll just figure God out. I'll put God in my box. He goes, no, it doesn't work that way. God is sovereign, and he moves, and that changes everything. Thousands said there is a God who exists above the sun, outside the box. In fact, this God created the box and everything in the box, and he sovereignly governs and interacts with the affairs of the box. And if we factor God in, only then can we find meaning. Because, see, meaning can't come from me. Here's what we do. Life without God is meaningless. And here's what happens. Well, you need to find your own truth and your own meaning in life. Seriously? I mean, that's such a common thinking. Well, you find your own purpose and meaning and truth in life. Really? I mean, if you're 18 and you tell a person that, you say, why are all these young people killing themselves? Well, come on. You're 18 and you go, you got to find meaning and truth and purpose in life. Seriously, how am I supposed to do that? I'm not that smart. I don't have the experience. I don't have the resources to pursue whatever. How am I supposed to figure this out? And by the way, you better hurry up because life's ticking and then you're going to die. And you better hope that at the end, you didn't totally miss it. You know how much, seriously? Who can live with that? Who can live with that? But what if there is a God who created us who would speak meaning into our hearts and lives? Whoa, thank you. What a gift. What a gift, right? How about all your efforts, all your work, all this stuff and vexation and whatever? Here's a verse that could bring such rest to your soul. God. Chapter 3, verse 14. I love this. Chapter 3, verse 14. I know, I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Because what I do certainly doesn't, right? Whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nothing taken away from it. God has done it, so the people fear before him. I love this in Psalm 127. It's some verses that have become very precious to me over the last year. I didn't realize until just this week that Solomon wrote it. And all of a sudden I went, whoa, what the connection with Ecclesiastes? Psalm 127, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. See, you do your own family, you're going to raise your kids, you're going to do all this. Really? How's that going? How many parents have you talked to that go, man, I poured my life into my children, and they just walked away from everything, and they hate me? I was meaningless. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. See, Solomon says, all is vanity without God. Yogi Berra was a catcher for the New York Yankees, a hilarious guy. He was just a fun-loving baseball guy, you know. He had all these famous sayings, you know, yogiisms. If you come to the fork in the road, take it. That was one of his a nickel isn't worth a dime anymore. And he had lots of sayings like that. You go, what? He was a funny guy. Well, there's a story. He's behind the plate one day catching. A guy comes up to bat. And the guy comes up and he makes a cross on home plate and then crosses himself and then gets up to bat. And Yogi Berra was reported he took his catcher's mitt and he wiped off home plate and he said, let's leave God out of this. Right? Do you understand that the prevailing thought of the day is, let's leave God out of this? You can if you want to. Life becomes meaningless. It's the life of the secularist. It's the life of the naturalist. It's the life of the spiritual atheist. Now, you say, well, Dan, we're in church. Now, if I'm sharing this on a university campus, this is where I would end it. But I'm in church with a bunch of people who come and go, well, Dan, we believe in God. Okay, here's the question for you and I this morning. Has God been marginalized in your life? This is where it comes home for us. Has God been marginalized in your life? Here's what I mean. Subconsciously, unaware, it happens all the time. We get rolling along with life. We take our cues from the people and the culture around us, and we begin to chase the wind just like everybody else. We begin to try and find meaning in the same places everybody else is trying to find meaning, and we're not finding it. That's right. Is God, you say, well, I believe in God. You may be a Christian. I'm a Christian. Has he been marginalized? Well, I believe in God. Well, what does it matter if you're not going to infuse him into every aspect of your life? See? Does God factor into every aspect of your life? That's why that's why this verse is so critical. Hanging up here, life of worship. 1 Corinthians 10:31. Again, you realize what it says. So whether we eat or drink. Now we're not into the move and shaking activities of life. We're down to the mundane things of life, the things that we get up and say, man, I go through this every day. Yeah, you eat and drink every day. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all to the glory of God. All of a sudden, everything changes. All of a sudden, meaning is infused into every activity, into everything that we do. I want to close this. This is I read this. I thought this is so powerful. It's lengthy, but I want you to listen to this. It's a blog. It's a quote from a blog by Tish Harrison Warren. Okay, she says that, as I grew up and was in my teen years and 20s, I was challenged. Do great things. You hear commencement speeches. Go change the world. And so she says I took these things seriously. But listen to her. She said, I'm a 30-something now with 2 kids living a more or less ordinary life. And what I'm slowly learning is that for me, being in the house all day with a baby and a 2-year-old is a lot more scary and a lot harder than being in a war-torn African village. What I need courage for is the ordinary, the daily everydayness of life. Giving away clothes and seeking out edgy Christian communities requires less of me than being kind to my husband on an average Wednesday morning or calling my mother back when I don't feel like it. We were challenged to impact and serve the world in radical ways. But we never learned how to be an average person living an average life in a beautiful way. Do you see where she's going? She's thinking through the questions Solomon asks and says, where is meaning in this monotonous, average life that I have, right? A prominent new monasticism community house had a sign on the wall that famously read this: everyone wants a revolution. No one wants to do the dishes. My life is really rich in dirty dishes and diapers these days and really short in revolutions. And I suspect that for me, getting up and doing the dishes when I'm short on sleep and patience is far more costly and necessitates more of a revolution in my heart than some of the more outwardly risky ways that I have lived in the past. The bravery it takes to believe that a small life is still a meaningful life, and the grace to know that even when I've done nothing that is powerful or bold or even interesting, that the Lord notices me and is fond of me. And that is enough. Do you hear what she's saying? She has been goaded in her life. What is meaning? And she's going, this is meaning. This is meaning. It's meaningless. And then God shows up. And everything changes. And everything changes. That's why later on in 1 Corinthians, Paul can write this amazing statement about our activities and all that we do and get all revved up about, right? Therefore, my brothers, be steadfast and immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. You know, it's not a response where you just say, well, I'll just twiddle my thumbs, nothing matters. But abound in the work of the Lord. It's a life of worship, knowing that in the Lord, your labor is not in vain. It is not meaningless. But without God, vanity, vanity. It's meaningless and chasing after wind. Let's pray. God, help us think about these things. Help us be goaded and then anchored by the nails, the truths, the realities of what we can have and know in you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.